I was off school on the day in question. I must have been feeling poorly, or had a dentist appointment or something, and was out of my mind with boredom. So I switched on the TV and started watching this daytime BBC show with the very catchy name of Farming. That was it, just farming. Later on, they'd spice it up, no doubt creating a whiff of scandal at Broadcasting House by renaming it Farming Today. Either way, it was just a guy in a suit and tie talking straight to camera. In this particular episode, about the difference between mulch and manure. Now, at this point, you might be asking yourself, why didn't the little lad just change the channel? But in the Northeast in those days, remember, the BBC was the only channel with Tyne Tees television, not launching until a year later or so. So it was either suffer through an episode of Farming in black and white just to add to the thrill, or stare at the wall. And I'd done so much staring at the wall as any 11-year-old boy could take in one day. So there I was, sitting and watching this mind-numbing form of entertainment, eyes glassing over, drool coming out of my mouth, when all of a sudden the credits rolled and this plummy-voiced BBC announcer said, "And now for the interlude." I almost certainly groaned, because if you can believe it, the BBC's interludes were even worse than the awful programming itself. Things like, here's a short film of a fish swimming in a pond, or here's an elderly Scottish woman decorating a pot, or, and now for a church choir singing a hymn, very slowly. But not on this day. Oh no, on this day, the gods of rock and roll had decided that little Brian Johnson at number 1 Beach Drive was going to get a bolt of lightning. Instead of being treated to a short film of fish swimming, I suddenly found myself staring in awe at a black guy with a wafer-thin mustache and a crazy mop of hair. Oh, and he was wearing makeup and a sequined shirt with a skinny tie, and everything about him was just so obviously, wildly, fabulously gay. But of course, gay to me just meant happy, and it would for many more years to come. "This young American boy goes by the name of Little Richard," said the announcer, with a hint of mischief in his voice, like he knew this was far too racy for the BBC. "And here he is in his most popular song, which had been a terrific success over the Atlantic." With that, Little Richard opened his mouth and let out a noise at the very top of his lungs. That was just pure joy and liberation all rolled into one. A wop bob a loop bop a wop bam boom. Many have described the song Tutti Frutti as the sound of rock and roll being born, which is fitting because my dream of becoming a singer was born in that moment too. I felt like someone had just plugged me into the mains. Every part of me was suddenly standing on end. It was like nothing I'd ever seen, heard, or felt before, and it absolutely blew my mind. Like all highs, though, Tutti Frutti was very quickly followed by a crushing low, because I needed to hear those screamed lyrics and those unhinged woos, and that full throttle rhythm section again, immediately. But I was just an 11-year-old kid in Dunstan. I was too young to go to the record shop, I didn't have any money, and even if the single had magically fallen from the sky, I wouldn't have had anything to play it on. Our ancient wind-up gramophone only went up to 78 RPM. It was agony. Then, a few days later, coming home from school, I heard that unmistakable shriek of rock and roll ecstasy carried down the street. I ran around trying to find the source, and when I realized that it was coming out of our neighbor's downstairs window, I jumped the fence and just stood there in their front garden listening to it, mesmerized. Then it stopped. And to this day, I can't believe what I did next. I knocked on their front door. A lady answered in her curlers. I remember thinking that she seemed far too old to be listening to my kind of music, but she was probably only 19 or 20. "Sorry to bother you, missus," I said, feeling my cheeks turn bright red, "but could you play that again?" The lady looked back at me for a moment, not quite believing what she was hearing. "Well, if you'd like," she said, with a little smile. Then she went back inside. I heard the crackle and a hiss of a needle on vinyl, and then, oh yes, a wop bob a loo bop wop bam boom. Next thing I knew, the lady was back on the front step with me, doing the hand jive to the music. That just floored me. It was the best thing I'd ever seen. So, of course, I joined in, And there we were, this kid who had just failed his 11 plus, and this fully grown woman on a council estate in Dunstan, and we were grinning our faces off to this totally alien sounding but unbelievably exciting new kind of music. It was hands down the best Tuesday afternoon of my life. "What's your name, sweetie?" asked the girl out of breath when the song ended for the second time. I told her. "Well, it was nice to meet you, Brian." She said, "I'm Annette." Annette, if you're reading this, many thanks for pointing the way. The content on this channel is made possible from viewers like you. Help the channel grow by supporting me on Ko-fi, which you can find a link to below. You can also help by liking, commenting, sharing, and subscribing. Thank you again for watching, and I will see you guys next time.